listeners, it's Jana. Welcome back to Grief Out Loud. In this episode, I got to talk with David Ferrugio, who was 12 when his father was killed in the World Trade Center on September 11th. While that day became a defining collective memory for millions of people, for David, it marked the beginning of a lifelong relationship with grief. 25 years later, David continues to excavate and explore his grief, particularly through his podcast, Dead Talks, where he invites people into thoughtful conversations about death, loss, and what it means to keep living. In this episode, we talk about David's father and the ways he's continued to stay connected with him. We also get into what David instinctually turned to in his grief, including music, movement, and community, which were all avenues that allowed him to be in grief without needing to express it through words. But finding words has been a part of David's process. Along with the conversations he has on Dead Talks, his new book, You're Not Dead Yet: How Grief and Loss Can Teach You to Live, is coming out this September, marking the 25th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. David is earnest, funny, and like many of us from the New York, New Jersey area, uses some salty language. So just be aware if you're not into that or if you're listening with kids. Okay, here's my conversation with David Ferrugio. David, welcome to Grief Out Loud.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful. Well, Connecticut and New York, but we got East Coast blood here.
East Coast and lots of Italian, so.
A lot of vowels.
Well, it's always nice to talk to somebody else who's in the grief podcast sphere, and I love your show, Dead Talks. And I'm really looking forward to just delving more into your personal story around grief. And I know we're going to go back in time, but I wanted to start with something that happened very recently where you had an opportunity to view your father's forensic file and sit in the room with all of the things that they were able to find from the towers. And yeah, what was that experience like?
Bizarre. And even leading up to it, I kind of questioned myself, like, why am I doing this? You know what I mean? I kind of went in understanding that I don't know if this is going to, fulfill anything or help me in any capacity. I feel like throughout this 25-year journey since 9/11, when I was 12, I always wanted to look for different angles and, I don't know, maybe gain a subconscious understanding of what was going on. And I got introduced to a new friend of mine, Matt, who also lost his father on September 11th. And we were just connecting on some things. And he mentioned the opportunity to go to the memorial. And apparently there's a file on every individual. And my imagination started running. I figured what it was, especially when it's a forensic file. So it's pretty black and white right there. And I talked to my sister. I let her know. And I was like, I'll go because I just want to go. But I have a feeling like, let me just go. I'll let you know what's going on. You could come with me if you want, but I feel like it's not going to be that helpful. And, I sat in the room at the memorial and looked at his file, which was rather thin. They didn't find much. It was essentially just one thing that they found that they were able to identify him. And it was just paperwork. It wasn't anything gruesome visually. It was just, for lack of better words, real and raw, seeing certain files and things my mom filled out in the forensics and DNA coding, itemizing my father down to a number. And it was just kind of, again, I struggled with the words to do it. It was like cold, not in a negative way, it was just raw. And for whatever reason, again, I felt the need to do it. And as expected, I came out, I was like, okay, it wasn't some big healing moment. Like, thank God I saw my dad's forensic file, but it was just another piece of the puzzle that is grief, and that is this journey for the rest of our life that I personally just wanted to partake in. And, I'm happy that I did, but it's not something that I necessarily would recommend unless you're, I guess, attached to death by the hip like I am, whatever that means.
Well, it's interesting to think about sitting in that room with the file and your dad's life basically like reduced to cold clinical documentation, which makes me want to kind of go back in time and talk about your dad's life and wondering, you were 12 when he died. What did you know about him at that point in your life?
He showed up, as a young boy. I have some ideas of what a father should do outside of my own dad. I had a lot of good friends who had great fathers and that I'm still in touch with today. So I understood in some capacity how lucky I was to have a father that did show up and that was present in my life and expressed love and supported me. So I was very blessed in that aspect, which is going backwards and forwards, is why I do find myself grateful for even just getting 12 years for a dad who was there, because I've talked to so many people that don't have that. But even at a young age, my dad was funny. He was silly. I can tell he wanted to make everyone feel at home and comfortable, which is stuff that I feel like I've took from him, and I consciously try to be that person, even though I can be a pain in the ass in many ways, more than one. But he was just a presence, you know what I mean? Like I feel like when he walked in the room, you knew he was there, but not in a boasting way. He didn't come in and say, "Hey, I'm here." It was just you knew he was there without him saying anything because he was very physical. He'll give you one of those good old East Coast pat in the backs, and you knew he was there type thing. And I think some of my favorite memories are just the fact that he would show up for me, come to my games, be there straight from work. And I think all that was exemplified. Like I'll never forget and always remember every time I heard the garage door open when I was on the other side of the house, I knew he was home. And the garage door was come up around 6 o'clock, whatever time it was, and I would always run to the door. And I still remember that feeling. And I think that just exemplifies the love that I had from him without even being as truly grateful as a young boy can be as I am today, if that makes any sense. But yeah, he was the man, and that's why it can hurt so much.
As you're describing him, I'm picturing like a foundation, like a foundational person in your life who, it's not as showy as the siding necessarily, but you're very grateful it's there and you can feel it holding everything up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, my mom, my sisters are all part of that same foundation, which is why the house is still standing. Like my dad was a big major part of that foundation, and we need to repair it along the way. But due to the rest of my family and everyone that was a part of this is still a part of my life, the house never fell down as damaged as it was.
And in your description of having those 12 years with your dad and still having a lot of the visceral memory of being in his presence or what your connection with him felt like, are there things you've learned about him since he's died as you've grown older? Other aspects of his personality or stories about him that you didn't know then?
Yeah, my uncle, my dad's best friend and best man at his wedding. We have a really strong relationship, and I've actually connected with some of my childhood friends, fathers who commuted with him to work, and I love that so much because it's one of those things that you rarely can get, maybe not rarely, but there's new stories that you can hear, which I think you're alluding to, and memories that I wasn't a part of become like a new memory and things you'll never think you'll get again. So when I see new photos, it feels new, and it's just I love that feeling, and I love hearing more stories about him. And my dad's friend shared a story where, as I go through it, just reminded me of me. Like it was something that I would do today. I still do as a 37, relatively immature man when it comes to playing around with my friends and making jokes and whatnot. He told me this story of when they were commuting to the city, going from Middletown, New Jersey to New York City, big commuter town. Apparently, they went through the toll booth, and I guess I left. I guess it was his car, and I left like this toy claw. It's one of those things where I'm trying to explain it for the listeners without looking at my hands. You grab on the bottom, and it has like every finger's in a little contraption where you control the fingers, and the claw moves. Like you can move the hand. And so apparently, when he's going through the toll booth, he grabbed that, put the money of the toll in the claw, and then with no prompting, just like goes to the toll guy with the claw, drops the money in his hand, unprovoked. And everyone was like, "What are you doing?" The toll man kind of was like confused, and then just drives off, and he's bursting laughing, and so is everyone else. And the point I tell that story is, I think why it warms me up so much. Like, oh my god, I told him on the phone when I was hearing the story. That's something I would do. It's so stupid. It's not even that funny, but it's just to get a reaction kind of thing. And at 5:45 in the morning, who wants to deal with that? But it kind of cracked the ice a little bit. And it's just tiny, small little story that I think makes me, and I don't know, partially want to be like him, but also like, no, I am like him, and the silliness and what he wanted to accomplish with just those silly moments. And it's those stories that I've never heard hearing from one of his best friends that still stick with me.
Well, as someone who did grow up in New York and New Jersey, or New York, New Jersey relatives, I can totally hear the laughter in that car and then how it got talked about all the way to the office after that.
Yeah, it's like it's not even it's meaningless, but it's meaningful at the same time.
Well, I was thinking that pretty much anyone older than 6 right now remembers where they were when 9/11 attacks happened. What do you want to share about how that day unfolded for you?
I'll share whatever you want. So if you have questions as I tell it, please feel free. But I was in seventh grade. I was 12 years old. And what I do remember is being in first period and my friend who was notoriously late for school, at least it wasn't shocking at the time, came in and knew my dad worked in the World Trade Center. So this is a little after 9 o'clock. My dad was in Tower One for context, the first building that got hit, second one that went down. And he goes, "Hey, Dave, doesn't your dad work in the World Trade Center?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" He said, "A plane flew into the building." And once he said that, it was like, what does that even mean? What do you mean a plane flew into the building? So it wasn't catastrophic, end of the world type thought. I was like, what the hell? What does that mean? And I guess he only had so much information for whatever reason. So I tried going down to the main office. They didn't allow me to connect to my family. And I like to add some context as to why I don't think they did before everyone starts, heads are spinning for not allowing a 12-year-old boy to call home. Big commuter town, as I mentioned. And I think a lot of kids in my school had people working in Manhattan. People worked in the World Trade Center. So it's probably a difficult decision for schools to allow everyone line up and make a phone call. They probably trusted the parents to make their own decision to pull them out of school. My school didn't put TVs up, so we were kind of left in the dark the whole day. And my family left me in school that day, which is a decision I back because again, they didn't know what was going on. They're going to pull me into the chaos, this, that, and the other. I was safe in school, like a half a mile away, not even. And I explained that part because I was wondering what was going on the whole day. Just definitely nervous, but I'm not sure I could have fathomed it being as catastrophic as it was. And I went through the school day. It's time to leave. The bell rang. It's like 2:30 and change. And mind you, at this time I didn't know, but now looking back, it was like two timelines at once because it was already done. It was all happening. Now the eerie part about it, I'm thinking about it, wondering what's going on at school. The second building's hit. My dad that goes down. My dad's building goes down. It's all done before I knew what happened. And that when I go back and replay, like it's just a bizarre cross-eyed type thought. So I make my way back from school home, walking with my best friend, and I remember going around the bend where you can start seeing my family home. And I remember seeing a lot of cars outside, like a shit ton of cars on a Tuesday, which was the first red flag. I was like, oh, okay. Even at 12 years old, I'm like something just happened, something bad happened outside of the information I had. I get into the house and my mom separates me and James. I don't remember many details about that interaction or the first word she said. All I remember is making my way to the living room, wanting to see the TV. And I remember seeing my cousin's face, still to this day, like, sitting on the sofa on the right corner, looking at me, just this face of fear. And I can't imagine what's going through his mind. I brought him up to it, but I try to explain it as he just understood my life was about to change forever beyond the other emotions that he's understanding what just took place. I look at the TV. I see the replay for the first time. Again, it was a replay. It's already happened. And that's when I remember just sobbing. Everything just immediately came out. Even at 12 years old, it's pretty obvious what just took place looking at the plane hitting the building, my dad's building collapsing. And then everything went black. It's like my body just hit a wall. I was like, this is too much. We gotta block this out until a day comes where you gotta figure this out on your own. And it's kind of representative of a lot of my experience, which is a lot of it is forgetfulness. And due to that trauma block, the defensive mechanism that, you may be able to define better than me, but a lot was a blur after that. I do remember things, of course, but the rest of that day, I don't remember it at all.
One of the things I was wondering about, and this might have just been like an observer of 9/11 when it happened. It seemed like there was so much in the news about people like putting up posters and trying to find their person and having hope that perhaps they would be rescued. It sounds like in your family that wasn't part of it, that it was very clear that your dad had died, or was that a part of your experience as well?
I think it was both. I did a family episode with my mom, my sisters. They've all been on it individually. Well, my sisters, my mom, and then I did a family episode, ironically, not ironically, at the 9/11 memorial. So it was very special. And I asked that question to my mom. I was like, where were you guys at with thinking if he was going to come home? And my mom said when she woke up the next day, she knew he wasn't coming home. So there's still hope. Like she wanted to hang on to hope and offer that to her children. My sisters I think Jacqueline was 19. Gina was 17, about to be 18 in a couple months. And yeah, there was hope because they started getting phone calls. A lot of people we knew saying, oh, so-and-so came home. So people were making home a little later in the day. But I think just objectively, while trying to manage that hope, he's on the 105th floor. He's above impact. So as much hope as you wanted to have, there is a thought process. There's a strong chance he's not getting out of there. We don't. It was on the 105th floor. So it was a blend of hope and also just a realization that, especially when they woke up the next morning and there was no news from a hospital and other people were already home. I think everyone knew. But I remember like a day or two later, I vaguely remember it, but then I know it more from story. There was a news channel that came into my town of Middletown because Middletown lost, I believe, the most people outside of New York City. We lost, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people in our town. And a news channel came and everyone was holding up signs and names, like showing the cameras, this or that. My mom did, I don't think she wanted to do it for whatever reason, but she decided to. My older sister Jacqueline wanted to go and do it. They made a sign, explain, like show my dad's photo, this or that. And the wild part about that is that it was on camera and it was footage that I found over the years because on like a little memorial online where people comment on victims' photos, so many people commented on my dad's photo that said, "Oh, that poor woman, aka my sister, that was begging for her dad's life." And I remember finding the footage, and it's a very emotional clip of my sister Jacqueline, again 19, just crying, holding my dad's sign. You see my little stupid backwards slanted hat in the background. My mom holding my sister, and she's just begging for her life, just saying, "Please God, find my dad. Dad, come home," hysterically crying, and it was like a 18-second clip, but the emotion that she poured affected so many strangers that went out of their way to comment on my dad's photo because of the impact that these people had on her. It was just this visceral, raw crying, and I think blends what I was expecting, where she kind of knew, but at that point, she's doing anything she can with that little bit of hope that she had. I think that was exemplary of where we were. He was too high up. The video, the footage, everything we saw just seemed really unlikely, but we wanted to pray and hope that my dad was coming home, and ultimately he didn't.
It seems like as you're describing that, I'm going back to what you said about everything kind of went dark for you in that moment, and that forgetfulness has been a big part of your early grief. And that seems like a lot of your experience has been doing your own sort of like investigative reporting into
Yeah.
what happened and the emotions of it to have a connection. And when you did see that footage, what did it bring up for you emotionally?
Well, outside of the first time in that story I just told you, that was obviously the first bang, if you will, no pun intended. And later on, in regards to that description you just said, it kind of does feel like what you said, like investigative journalism, because I wanted to see every angle. I wanted to find out. It was kind of the opposite of what I understand my mom did. I don't know if she saw the towers go down more than once or a couple times. She just doesn't want it. It doesn't serve her, and that's fair. It's fair, very fair. I've seen it. I can't countless times, and I don't remember the timeline. I don't know if it was right after or throughout my teens. I would specifically seek out the footage that was online and watch it on replay, just replay the same footage, look for new footage, new news reporting. I would see everything. And I knew even then, when I remember back, I wanted to cry. I wanted to get it out. And I thought this would be a way to do it subconsciously and partially. It could be just me wanting understanding from something that I'm not sure I was ever going to understand, just see what's out there, putting myself there. I always felt like I wish I was there, even though I don't even know what the heck I would have done at 12 years. I just wanted to be there. I wish I was in the building with my dad. I wish I was there trying to save him. So I've been putting myself there, was this imaginative state in some capacity. I don't know, to soothe me, understand. I don't know, but I just do know I was watching the footage like a lunatic, acknowledging, am I teetering off the side? Like, this is not a good idea. But I really think I balanced it well enough to make myself cry. There's like this energy that I knew by watching this, maybe I wasn't crying enough. This would get it out. And it did. I would cry. And I think now looking back at that, it was a form of exposure therapy. And granted, I could have, I was doing it on my own, unsupervised. Who knows if it could have went the wrong way, but I think it made me accept it and face it and stand there and watch it and sit in it and not run away from it and realize that I'm still standing here, I'm still breathing. As simple and cliche as that is, I think it had a profound impact on me, just sitting in my emotions. As someone who is more introverted emotionally and not expressive verbally, I would express it through writing or in my own little world. And my mom would be very gracious to give me the opportunity to speak, which bless her, because she wanted me to speak, but she wouldn't force it. She's going to let me ride it out with support on the side. And I was very introverted. And now fast forward, I'm talking about it so openly. I just wonder how much of that was me facing it in that capacity. I'm not saying I'm recommending exposure therapy in the most visceral way possible. For me, I think that had a big contribution to my willingness to accept it and see it and sit in it. And I think all of those are partially a piece of the pie when it comes to going through this. And that's what worked for me personally.
As you're describing it, it's as if you were building your confidence in being able to withstand, whether it
Mm.
was withstanding the loss, withstanding the emotions that came with it, and that consistent exposure to it of like, oh, I'm still here, I'm still breathing. That really stood out to me when you said that. Like, oh, I can withstand this.
Yeah, is that how you see it? Like, what do you what is that? What do you think that driving force is for a young boy to intentionally, constantly watch the footage outside of what you just said? Does it go deeper than that?
Oh, I don't know. I'm no therapist, David.
Yeah, pretend you are. It's okay. Chat GBT me my trauma right now, please.
Well, I just think collectively how many people also watch the footage over and over again, which to me, when something so unfathomable, that's a really hard word to say, happens, it goes beyond what our conscious mind can take in and make sense of, to just like replay it, to go back to it, like to try to make sense of it. And it reminds me of, we talk a lot about how like the youngest kids will ask the story over and over again. Like what happened? What happened? Or they want to hear the same bedtime story every night, even separate from grief. You know, it's like the repetition is part of the comprehension sometimes.
Oh wow, it's fascinating. I didn't, as the youngest, I didn't even consider that or know that. Yeah, I don't know. That's why I think I threw out a bunch of different options of, not even options, just thoughts of trying to understand it, wanting to be there. I think it was this eclectic charcuterie board of confusion and trying to understand it. But, I think that's just one piece of the pie. My belief when it comes to grief, and just again, it's always from my personal perspective. It's not pigeonholing anyone to do this or not do this. I just think it's a lot of movement and trying different things and just seeing what feels good, what works, and not staying still, even though staying still is part of the process too. Like I said, I was sitting in it, that sort of staying still. And I was instilled by my mother to keep moving. Like she got us in school a couple, like 2 weeks later. And and quote unquote, bleep out, I'm not even gonna curse because it's so easy for me to curse. Like she didn't want this to F us up. And even though she knew it was gonna in some capacity, she realized like the world keeps spinning. We got to keep moving, not in a desensitized way. She would have like round table opportunities for us to speak, which I don't even remember. I asked my mom about that. She's like, yeah, we'd have our dinners and allow everyone to express whatever they want to express. So even though she was someone who's grabbed the bull by the horns, very tough, strong Italian mother, she was emotionally in touch too. She was brilliant with adding that. And it was just my inability to express myself. She would say, I would just sit there, observe, and just cry. And like tears would come out of my eyes. Maybe my sisters would be more vocal than me. And then that was just how I took it. I was very observant and I think that relates to my willingness to watch the footage. It was instead of me saying things, I was internalizing. But even just the internalizing can be a double-edged sword. You know what I mean? I had to be aware of that too. And then at some point, through guidance and support, who knows? I finally came to it, but I don't think it was years later till I was able to be more vocally expressive.
What else did you find yourself sort of instinctually turning to in those early like days, weeks, months, year of grief?
Linkin Park in a punching bag. That was another part of my process. My dad had a punching bag in the basement, very big jack dude, and he had his Bose little stereo, which was mind blowing at the time, even though it was the size of a Ford F-150. And I, again, it's very fuzzy for me to be like, was this the end of seventh grade? Was it eighth grade? I don't know the timeline. I just remember when I believe, at least thought no one was home unless my mom and my sisters just let me go to town. I would blast Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, which is still my favorite album. And it was just very, for those that don't know Chester Bennington or Linkin Park, very aggressive, emotional music, kind of a lot of screaming, but beautiful, painful music. And I would blast that with the punching bag and just go to town with the punching gloves on until I would eventually take the gloves off, had the tape on my hands, and just go to town until my knuckles bled, literally. And I would scream and just let it out. And that was part of the process too. That was something I leaned on, but I understand that was only part of it. It wasn't just punching bag, scream, Linkin Park. All right, I'm better now. It was that. It was the exposure therapy that I couldn't define at the time. It was having my mothers, my sisters, my friends. It was being frustrated. It was all the icky stuff that, we could feel guilty about because, as Nora McInerney has said on my podcast, sometimes grief brings out the worst in you. And it's kind of like it's that purge that I think is just part of the process too. And we got to give ourselves permission to go through all that. But a big part of me was the music, was the physical expression, I suppose, as an angst, frustrated teenager. Who knows? But I think that that's definitely one thing that stands out of me amongst a lot of it.
One thing I'm thinking about, David, is you said a few times like I don't know if you used the word good, but you're like I wasn't expressive, I wasn't expressive. And as you're describing it now, there were so many avenues of expression. It just seems like in our world, we preference verbal expression. We preference finding the words and creating a narrative that other people can understand, something that's digestible to others as like I don't know, the pinnacle of grief expression, when so much of it is just that more visceral, physical, emotional, musical, writing, crying, all those other pieces that seem like you had a lot of access to.
Yeah, you're right. And I thought I alluded to it, how there was other avenues as I just expressed and you pinpointed. Who knows? Maybe that starting with those helped me get to where I am now, which is still definitely still a process. As 37-year-olds realize I still have a lot to learn, still a lot to grow from. But at the same time, yeah, I think you're right. All those other avenues, were just training wheels to get to the vocality of it. And I even say like, yeah, who know talking I have a podcast and so do you that talks about it. I'm like doesn't mean this is the answer, it's just part of it. It's just I think it does help, but it's just a piece of the entirety of what you got to go through, whatever the heck that is. But I think that does make sense. All my other avenues were just had to precede the notion of me verbally expressing it, which again is another part of it.
The other aspect of your story I was wondering about is you have this very personal tragedy that unfolds in a very public way that's also part of a collective. Like you mentioned, your town had, the highest number of people who died. What was it like to be navigating a personal loss as part of such a collective story?
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox. I mean, it's weird because 9/11 feels so representative of grief in many ways because grief to me is such a universal experience. 9/11 felt like a universal experience because it was nation and globally. And then at the same time, grief can be a very isolating experience. So even though I and those that were else that lost someone in my family and just other people that lost people on 9/11, it still is such an individual experience that's overshadowed by the universality of it, if that's even a word. And it was great because of the support that we had and the rallying. And then I started getting a little, not about self-conscious, maybe a little guilty or of all the attention that I got. Because, as soon as I go to school, I'm the 9/11 boy. Everyone knows my dad died. I'm pretty sure that's why I made the seventh grade baseball team, which no one's ever admitted, but I think that's why. And even though it was good, but it's tough to make it as a seventh grader. But nevertheless, it's just small little things are being treated a little differently out of love and good intentions. But now everyone knows that my dad died. Everyone knows that anniversary. So I get those wonderful text messages every year. And then at the same time, it's not overshadowed, but it's like I'm still grieving my father, but now he's just part of this big event. And I'm sure a lot of people that were part of that feel the same way. It's not to throw shame on. It's not negative or bad. It's just or good. It's just is. It's part of the nature of it. So I think that duality it's just it's strange. It's strange to on my dad's anniversary every day, it's commemorating a lot more people, and that's fine. So that's when it's up to me to make it more personal and do something that is personal to me. And not that I need the attention. If anything, I want less attention at this point. 'Cause it's been so much attention. And that's kind of the big crux of what I'm doing, because I want to shed the light on other people's stories, other people's experiences that don't get that acknowledgement because they didn't die on a public day. But I think the duality of the publicity behind it and also getting thrown into one of 3,000 people. And it's just, it's personal and depersonalized at the same time. And it's been like a balancing act ever since to kind of just process that. But at the end of the day, it's just a very absurd, bizarre way to experience grief.
Were there supports that were available through like your school when you went back to school or for your whole town with it being such a community loss?
Yeah, I don't remember anything in school, but I mean, a big pillar for me was my little league baseball team. Big baseball dad. My dad would show up to, he would coach me a couple of times when I was younger. He would be very involved and show up to my games. Baseball, and at that time, my life was a big part of me and my dad's relationship, playing together. And I'm still friends with pretty much everyone on that team. Like, I'm in group chats with the same guys I play little league baseball with. I'm close with their family, their parents, and all that stuff. So they were an incredible support. Even like one of the most honorable things that happened was my dad was known for saying, "Hey kid," like "Hey kid," and my uncle, his best friend, I thought it was just mostly just a thing he did. He's like, "I'm pretty sure most of the time he did it because he forgot your name and he just said, 'Hey kid,' so like be polite." But he still say it anyway. Like even if you knew him, like, "Hey kid," like that was his thing. So everyone knew him as that. And my coaches, the Duds, the Gunaris, and everyone that's still part of my life, they on the little jersey, the undershirt that we had, they ended up getting HK embroidered on the left side for "Hey Kid" for my dad, and HK has always been a thing since. And I get my friends on sometimes on the anniversary, I get a text from my friend Brian, for example, and it's like, just send HK, like that's all it needs to be said. And the whole point of telling that story is just like that's the support. You know what I mean? It wasn't this therapy session. It wasn't this intervention of sitting down and talking with one another. It was just saluting the American flag on the anniversary or something like that, putting the HK in the jerseys, my friends still being there, showing up for the memorial that we had. So I think the therapy can come in other forms, and that support can just be showing up. And I was blessed to have that. All my childhood best friends and the parents that showed up, and it was this community thing. Because again, my dad wasn't the only one, so there were other families there as well. And this pressure to show up for other people can be hard. It's hard even for me as the quote unquote one of the death guys in this space. I'm like, I don't. It's tough to come up with the words, but sometimes just showing up and little tiny gestures and just knowing that you're there to catch them if they need it is kind of all you need. And I had a lot of that.
I'm curious about the first time you went to the official memorial at the site of the towers. What do you recall about that?
There's a lot I don't remember. I don't know if we went. I forget the first time we had access. I want to say maybe it was a few months into 2012, maybe. I do remember. I just remember vaguely going down. Like we were in the pit of it, where there's a long ramp we got to go down. We were just in the excavation area where it all happened. But a lot of that I don't remember, and that's some of the frustrating things. Is like I was actually talking to someone about scheduling some kind of hypnosis or some shit like that, just to see if there's someone I can just go back to some memories that I want to pull up, just out of curiosity now, back to that kind of investigative journalism idea, because I remember these things, but I don't remember like how did I feel, what was going through my mind, and I don't know how much of that would help me if I did understand. But I think at this point, 25 years later, I'd be curious to understand what was going through, if some of that could be pulled up or some closed off memories. I do remember going there again. I don't remember the date. I'm pretty sure it was at some point the first quarter of 20 2002. But those are things that a lot of my process is asking my mom, my sisters what they remember, and pulling up memories for me, which is kind of unfortunate. But again, I think even David Kessler had on the podcast, Mr. Grief himself, said sometimes denial can be a good thing, because sometimes it's just some things you just is too much for you to handle. And also, again, my mom even said, like, what would it serve you to remember certain things? But even that's part of my process 25 years later. It's like, I kind of, at this point, I'm good. I'm as good as I can be growing around it. And I would like to know heroic stories for you that day. I kind of got like a blip of a memory.
Yeah. And since then, I'm assuming you've been back as
Yeah.
a more where maybe you weren't in that place. What do you recall about the times that you have gone back where you do have access to the actual physical, visceral, emotional memory of it?
I've been back a lot. I do remember when they first opened it. I forget what year it was. We had access to go early, and I did go with my brother-in-law. Again, sometimes my memories, I'm like, did I make this up or this actually happened? But me and my brother-in-law walked through, and it was like we were like the only ones. And I don't know, for anyone that's been there, they did a really good job. It looks real. It's beautiful. It's well done. But definitely making a lot of money. I don't even know where that's going, but there's a part in the bottom floor where it's a very audio visual timeline and walkthrough, and it's like it's that morning all the way linearly to the end of the day, and there's artifacts and news footage and stories. And it's very, very, very visceral. That one was emotional. Like That one's like you have to be prepared for what you're about to walk through because again, it's very visual and it's a heavy little walkthrough. But I remember walking through like shit. It was a lot. It definitely was a lot. But again, for whatever reason, who knows if it's the exposure therapy we just talked about, I can walk through that. And I know it's something like my mom's, I'm almost positive, never walked through that. She doesn't, it's not going to serve her. I think that's the individuality of this experience. One thing for me is not for someone else and vice versa. But I've been back a lot since. I stay downtown every time I go to New York and I go back often. Like I was just there the other day, but it's evolved for me. Like I have a very dark sense of humor. So I cope through humor, not as a defense mechanism, but as levity. So I'm way more comfortable walking those grounds. I literally had to go to the bathroom so bad. Too much for sharing this. I literally use the family pass to get into 9/11 just so I could use the bathroom. So at this point, I'm not healed, but I'm doing pretty good. If I can just, if anything, it's a nod to my dad because that's something he would probably do again. So I think all things considered, I've walked through this the best I can right now, but still learning.
What's your sense, David, of how your dad's death and your grief shaped some of the choices you've made as like a young adult into adulthood?
I'm assuming tremendously. Like, how can it not? But the rest of the decision, like all with that question, all I'm left with is just hypothesizing what would I have done in a situation I'm not aware of. So it's when I moved to California, I was 20, 21, 22, and I finished college. I worked the summer bartending just to make some money and then left October 2011 to move to California with an unpaid internship and a Craigslist interview. And leaving a family that I'm extremely close with that I love dearly. And it was like the opposite of you think that someone would do that lost their father at a young age. Why would I go further from my family? Family that supports my decision, wants me back, and I want to be back, but they get it. Like I see them all the time. I'm very blessed to be going back often. But then I wonder, like, would I have, if my dad was still around, I probably wouldn't have flown to Cal. I wouldn't have drove to California and moved there. Chances are maybe I would have just gotten, taken the beaten path of following his shoes. He maybe would have got me a job at Cantor Fitzgerald, wherever he'd still be working with at that time. And I'd be doing the financial thing downtown in New York, yada, yada, which I don't want to do and haven't want to done. But I'm assuming a decision to just live this life, figure out what I want to do, get lost, make mistakes, be unsure, and just see what it's like on the other side of the country with no rhyme or reason. I don't think I would have made those decisions if he didn't die, but I don't know. I always wonder that all the time. Like, who would I be today, for better or for worse, if he was still around? Because again, I would have a loving father, so there's not even that. But I just don't know if I would have understood the fragility of life as much without it. And that's where the gold comes from in these experiences. And it's not rushed to find the gold, but at the same time, so much good has come from this. And it's not to say I would not trade it all in to have my father back or the 3,000 people. I'd say obviously I would. That's not how it works. We don't get a grief receipt. This is how we use it, how we move on, and what we do with it. So it's even with all that, there's so much that came from it. I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't have my podcast. I wouldn't have connected with so many amazing people and learned from them. And I'm not saying it's tit for tat or the value is equivalent. It's just we can only control so much, and I have control over my choices. I have control over my responses. I have control over my perspectives. And that offers some sense of control in an unknown, uncontrollable world. And I'm very blessed to have had so many good things come from a very terrible experience.
Well, one of the things you have done is start your podcast, Dead Talks, which has been around for a number of years. How did you come to want to start it? And then what has it been like to go so, public with grief, yours and other people's?
Oof. Kind of about flying by the seat of my pants. It's kind of like this. I forget who. So someone read the first chapter of my book and said something like, "Oh, I wrote that." Like I completely forgot. I kind of blacked out when I wrote the book. Terrible marketing statement, by the way. But they were saying something like, I remember reading it back. I was like, "Oh yeah," it was like this cosmic urge that I was be doing what I'm doing. And I'm not saying this like I'm the best at it or this is my call. It just feels right. And I remember when I was a teenager, I had this feeling, this little wink from the universe that I'd be talking, which is probably annoying for a lot of people. And I felt like it was going to come back to my dad. And that was before podcasts were a thing, I'm pretty sure. And then fast forward, I was like, I feel like I want to shed the light on other people's stories because of what I alluded to earlier. I got a lot of attention from it. But what about someone else that died in 9/11, 2017 kind of thing? And I thought that it's something that should be talked about. People say death and taxes. Not everyone pays their taxes. So it's like death is the one thing we're left with. Let's talk about it. Let's normalize it because I got to a place where I felt comfortable with it. And it initially started at a layover in Denver. Not, it didn't start there, but I remember I had a layover in Denver. I had a few hours to kill, so I got a joint, started smoking by myself, thinking about the podcast. I called my friend Will, like, dude, what if I only talk to comedians because I want it to be lighthearted, da, 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 da. And then it started evolving to this is too much, too hyper focused. I was like, should I only talk to people who lost their parents? Like, no, let's just talk about death. This is overall from financials to afterlife, everything about death. And I just did it. I just started with people I knew and started getting traction, even though I continually doubted it. I was like, who the heck is gonna like, how can I, is this, why can I do this for the rest of my life? Because I feel like this is what I want to do. And I'm not there yet. I'm like, it's making moves. And it's not so much about, I would still do this if I couldn't do it for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? If I, like as a career, I would still make it work because I enjoy it that much. And now it's just become more of a realization. I'm sure you've realized over the years, people want to talk about this. People want to share. People want to be heard. People want to disagree and understand and find similarities with people that are going through this very confusing experience. It's the most natural and normal thing, even when it happens in unnatural ways. It is the human experience. It is the other side of the coin, if you will. And it's been bizarre to me that even though plenty of other cultures and other people have talked about death, it's just not as normalized as I thought the most normal human experience would be. And I just want to take part of it and continue to talk to amazing people like you and just further the conversation.
What has, and this might be a very impossible question to answer, but in the conversations that you've had with so many guests over the years, what has shifted for you in your understanding of your own grief? Like looking back at 12-year-old David, do you understand him in a different way now because of these conversations?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like even that quote that I mentioned with David Kessler, he mentioned the power of denial, and for a long time, it seemed like denial as a stage of the state, many facets of grief was maybe it's just me misunderstanding it. Like denial seemed like a negative connotation. Like denial is part of the process you got to work through, and he flipped denial as kind of as a positive, where there is a benefit to that. There is a reason why our body does that. It is a defense mechanism to protect you. And a lot of that forgetfulness that I've talked about today has been frustrating for me, and it made me question things like, did I show up as a child? Like, was I the man of the house as a boy kind of thing? I don't remember some things, and it was frustrating not to remember. And then when he alluded to that whole denial thing can be positive, I think that's just one very small detail that shifted it. But for me, it was just adding a lot more compassion and made me think of the bigger picture a lot more outside of just me, and my family, which is rightfully so. It's a very family dynamic experience, which is understandable. But then it just opened my eyes to, even though I knew everyone went through it, to hear all these different stories, it just made me shift not only my grief experience, but my life experience and looking at people as little onions walking around and how many layers we have, and just this person didn't open the door for me when I didn't say thank you when I opened the door, and I could say he's an asshole. I'm like, he could be dying of cancer. As ridiculous as that sounds, I'm not trying to give assholes a cop out, but at the same time, it's like it just made me look at things totally different from hearing more experience and open my eyes and just take a breath and just understand that we're all walking through this weird little life of ours with no idea what we're doing. Even when people say we know what we're doing, we barely know why we're here, even though a lot of my involvement with the show is looking into that afterlife and just coming to peace with not knowing, but also believing in certain things. And this idea of diving into the unknown, I think, is our entire existence. And that's where I think freedom is. I think freedom is getting in the unknown, which is everything, and being comfortable there. And so this show has helped me personally so much as I hope it's helped other people.
Well, it's interesting in the idea that, conversations, I think, give us so much space for the unknown and to be delving into the nuances and the different complications that people experience. And then the other thing that you're working on is your book that's coming out this year, September 11th, 2026. And when I think about writing a book, it's like, okay, I had all these conversations, but now I have to say something and commit myself to it. So
Yeah.
I wonder what that process was like to you, how you're feeling about the book coming out in the world.
I've kind of, it's like a que sera kind of thing, where I felt this like weird pressure, like, oh, who's gonna buy it besides my mom, my cousins, and where I was like, whatever happens, happens. I feel like I poured a lot into it. It's not a very difficult read. It's like it's under 200 pages, and a lot of it came out early on. Like when I had this conversation with a publisher I got introduced to, and it wasn't the time. Then a year goes by, and then I really started honing into it early last year in 2025. Took a year or so, but I wrote so much of it in the first couple months of just pouring out of me. Partially because I wanted to get ahead, but also I just was so locked in. Like I'm just gonna let it out, and then hopefully editors can make me seem smarter than I am because I'm just gonna lay it out there, yada yada yada. And I wrote it just I don't know, not so much to tell my story. Yeah, a lot of it is the beginning, especially is like that 9/11 and more details and what I experienced and my process throughout. But I try to make it like my podcast and a book where I do mention other stories. I've had 260 plus episodes, so it's not everyone, but I share other people's experience with grief and loss. I do touch into the spiritual side of things without pigeonholing a certain belief. Like you're going to know what I believe, but I explore other avenues and of other different beliefs and just leave it open for the reader because I do not want to write as if I have the answers because I don't. I have my experience, what worked for me, what didn't work for me, what sharing other people's stories. So I hope when people read it, it's I don't agree with that, but you got me thinking, or I agree with that. Let's try that, this, that, and the other. Like I mentioned, like a grief recipe in the book. That's kind of how I look at it. When someone gives you a recipe, you can follow the exact instructions and tastes delicious. Or next time you can add a little salt, add a little this, and make it your own with that foundation, or just scrap it all and make a weird ass dinner plate. I don't know. And that's kind of like what I'm trying to explain with the book is like this is my experience. So remember, I'm speaking from me. I'm sharing thoughts about what you can consider. Agree, disagree, that's fine. But I just hope it offers perspective because at the end of the day, it's a grief, death exploration book, but it's perspective is like the subtitle. I just want people to consider the idea that, what, maybe you can grow from this. Maybe things can be better. Maybe things will be okay. And I'm not saying to say, yes, it will, even though I am like that. I just don't want you to be like, no, it won't. And I want it to be like that sweet spot. Like maybe it can, maybe we can work with this kind of thing. And I just hope that's what it accomplishes in some capacity.
In some way, it's coming back to that idea of withstanding, and then from the withstanding, what else might unfold for folks in their grief.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. You said that in a kind of question, a rhetorical question. What else might unfold? And to me, it's just our brains are like Google search engines where we want to answer that question in the back of our mind, and then it's like paying attention. What is my brain saying? Is it focusing on the shit negative that hasn't happened yet, or you might be in it right now, or is it prophesizing about what if I can stay here? What if I can get used to this new normal? And I think those little tiny maneuvers, the way we think, make a massive difference. That stuff ain't woo woo anymore. It's pretty acknowledged the thoughts that go through our mind. And with practice, like going to the gym, you don't go to the gym for 2 weeks and say, "Well, I don't have a six pack. Well, I'm not going to go anymore." No, you're not that strong yet. You got to keep going. You're gonna have a six pack. Then 6 months later, a year later, like, oh damn, I see some lines on my arm. And then once you start seeing, you like celebrate those little victories. You celebrate that, and it'll get you back in the metaphorical gym. And I just think you got to start. It's very important to at least pay attention to what's going through our mind at a minimum. You don't have to do anything about it, but just acknowledge. I have been thinking this a lot lately. What if I just profit? What if things can be better? Just like play in that world a little, have fun, play with it, and just. I think it all adds up, and I think a lot of it really starts with what's going on between the eyes. And easier said than done, but say something that's not easier said than done. Like it's all work, it's all effort, and I just believe in the human capability for every single one of us. I've seen it too many times outside of myself, and we all have that little part of us that we can dig into.
Well, we know folks can go learn a lot more from you and from your guests by going to the Dead Talks podcast to listen. And for your book that's coming out in September, what's the title so people can have that on their radars?
Very bold. So it is, I don't know when this is going out, but it will launch officially out for pre-order now today in this present moment. It launches September 8th, right before the 25th anniversary. It's called You're Not Dead Yet: How Grief and Loss Can Teach You to Live. And just look it up, or it's on my website, www.deadtalks.net. But yeah, I've had a lot of great people on the show, and it's much bigger than me. So if you want to check it out, it's just Dead Talks podcast. Dead Talks, 2 words, yada, yada, yada. Thank you.
Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show, for telling us so much about you and your dad and your story and just all the things that you have been wrestling with and wrangling with and unfolding in your own life and perspective. So yeah, feeling really grateful for our time together today.
I appreciate you for accepting my provoked invitation to come on your own show. So I'm not going to pretend like you invited me here. I'm very persistent and I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, listeners, take that as a note of caution or invitation that you can reach out to me if you think you would like to come on the show and tell your story as well. And I offer gratitude to you for tuning in, for making the show mean something, for sharing episodes with people who might be interested in or helped by something that we're talking about here. If you want to learn more about Grief Out Loud and our organization, Dougy Center, you can head to our website, which is dougy.org. There you'll find information about all of our local programming, our free downloadable resources, including tip sheets and activity sheets, and of course, every episode of Grief Out Loud. We also have many opportunities for training and education that you can find out more about on our website as well. Always excited to share that the podcast is sponsored in part by the Chester Stephan Endowment Fund. Grief Out Loud is a production of Dougy Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.